Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Coulter. I'm one of the co-hosts of the Sustainable Business the Sustainable Business podcast. Mark and David are off on assignments today, but I have the wonderful pleasure of having three fantastic leaders with me. So I'm definitely not alone. And this is a special episode because we have three people from different parts of the UN Global Compact and from different regions. So we're going to have an interesting conversation on where all this might be going. So let me begin from and I'm in Washington today. So we have the Global Compact lead from Canada, from the US and Mexico. So I'm ready of all three of you, which is very fitting. And maybe I'll ask you, Elizabeth, to introduce yourself briefly.
Thanks. I'm Elizabeth Dove. I'm the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network Canada, and our headquarters is situated in Toronto. I've been in this role for 3 years.
Great. Now in the other official language now, Elizabeth, please, because we're bilingual country
today.
Yeah. And Amanda, how about you?
Sure. So I'm Amanda Gardiner. I'm the Executive Director of Network USA, which is the U.S. chapter of the UN Global Compact. And our network includes about 1,000 companies in the United States, headquartered here, committed to advancing responsible business. And we are based out of New York.
Excellent. Great. And last but definitely not least, Mauricio, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Chris. I'm Mauricio Bonilla, Executive Director of the Global Compact Network, Mexico.
Great. And how many companies are in the network in Mexico?
There are a little over 700 companies in Mexico. And I've been at the compact for over 6 years, actually.
Wow, that's great. And how long has the compact been going in Canada, Elizabeth?
I think we are at about 13 years right now, and we're at 230 businesses.
Wow, fantastic. Good. And Amanda, in the U.S., it's been the same.
I knew you were
going to
ask me that. I'm
generally,
unlike my lovely colleagues who are much more experienced. I have only been at the Network USA for about just under a year.
Okay, excellent, great. Well, but all of you have been doing sustainability for a while, and that's what's exciting. So I'd love to hear from each of you. How do you see sustainability? Like, what's different? What's exciting now? And maybe again, we'll start with you, Elizabeth. Like, what's cooking from your vantage point? How's the sustainability agenda going?
Yeah, great question. And maybe I can just give a little context about who the Global Compact is for your listeners who don't know about it. So the UN Global Compact is the world's largest voluntary corporate sustainability initiative. And around the world, there are 23,000 businesses who have made a commitment at the highest level, usually at the CEO level, to our 10 principles, which are organized around human rights and labor, the environment, and anti-corruption. And they agree to communicate on their progress annually, but also to really lean into those principles and the ways that they can advance the 17 Sustainable Development Goals to make a difference. So we really, at our core, are trying to raise the ambitions of businesses around the world and help them meet those ambitions. And actually, we are just at the beginning of a new 5-year strategy, which will take us to 2030, which, as you know, is sort of when we hope that the Sustainable Development Goals arrive, the world's to-do list. We're far from that. And that calibration really needs business to lean in differently. So we will continue to try to equip companies to be able to meet those needs, to lean into where they are best suited to make a difference. We will also be looking to really try to strengthen the business case. Now, that seems like really old hat, but the business case is always required, especially now as things, I think, are a little bit more geopolitically rocky. So those who are holding the purpose flags and organizations really need that business case articulated in a compelling way. And then a piece I'm super excited about, and I'm on the global working group to look at what's the role of collective action. Something that when we pulled our companies last year through Boston Consulting Group was really high on their list of ways they would like to work with us as a partner to face the future.
Excellent, great, and the SDGs. I mean, geez, there was so much excitement when they were launched. It kind of has gone a little quiet, but I'm glad to hear the compact still holding it. I mean, and Amanda and Mauricio, are the SDGs like timely relevant still from each of your geographical places?
Well, I think the U.S. is a little bit unique because we have a different position on the SDGs in the current administration than we had previously. But absolutely, the SDGs are still relevant. Many companies still use the SDGs as a framework that they incorporate in their sustainability thinking. I think, you asked about what do we think about sustainability and what are we, I don't know if you said, or what are we excited about, but if you didn't, I interpreted it that way because
let's do it. Yeah.
I am actually still excited about the agenda. I think, we've gone through a lot in just the last few years. We saw this huge expansion of sustainability as sustainability professionals coming out of the COVID crisis. Huge teams, huge funds moving towards sustainability. It really was starting to move margins to mainstream, which we've all wanted and hoped for. But of course, we're kind of in this different place now. And we do feel that at Network USA. There's these big political and economic pressures, legal pressures. Some companies are under a lot more scrutiny of what companies are doing on sustainability. And so frankly speaking, I think doing the work has become more difficult for sustainability people because of all of this. They're having to do more with less, with in some cases fewer people, changing terminology around, do we call it sustainability or do we call it resilience or something else? So I think that's kind of how the moment feels, is a little bit more constrained and almost smaller in a sense. But why that makes me excited is because in those moments of constraint is where innovation often happens. And I feel like through all of the change, what sustainability, what professionals and what this space and what companies are getting good at is how do we do more with less? How do we really think outside of the box, focus on what really matters and do those focus things very, very well? And so for me, I find that pretty exciting, even though it can feel heavy at times.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people. I mean, we're realizing we had to change what we were doing. What we were doing, 4 or 5 years ago was good, but still not sufficient. And so these new constraints are, I think, forcing organizations and the broader community to think of this differently. So that's great.
And actually, if I can provide an illustration to what Amanda was speaking of. Last year during New York Climate Week, which is just before the UN General Assembly, or as we like to call it, UNGA Week, I was in conversation with a multinational, and we had been part of a small conversation that was pulled together by the Harvard Club, just kind of at the end of Climate Week, reflecting on what's going on. And I'd expressed a bit of dismay that I'd heard, companies doing things that they thought were stealthy, but seemed to me like kind of a one-play strategy. Like, before we lost our DEI budget line, I gave it all to the employee resource groups. Or before we lost our sustainability line, we put it all in procurement. I'm like, then what do you do next year? Like now, that's the one move play, and I'm concerned that companies kind of can't keep shuffling the deck chairs. They really do need to be looking at like where do we need to stand on principle, and be prepared for what that might do to the bottom line. And so a company pulled me over quietly afterwards and says, I can show you where the light cracks through on that. I work for a very large company, family owned for a number of generations, and giving back to community, getting on board with whatever seemed to be the flavor of this is what a responsible company does was what we did. We were a mile wide and an inch thick. And now that the pressure is on, where things like executive orders or even pressure from things like tariffs were coming through, we're doing things that are really material now. And our leadership, it says it's got to have impact. If we're going to have risk in doing the right thing, it's got to have impact. And she sees that as a real positive in her portfolio, that it's just narrowing in on what they can do well, as opposed to we're doing all the things.
Yeah, I think that getting a bit more specific and focused in this time and looking for and measuring with the discipline of measuring and proving that there's impact and all this, like there's a lot of that going on, which is exciting. Now, Mauricio, in Mexico, ¿qué pasa? What's happening around sustainability?
What's happening?
Yeah.
I mean, there have been very interesting and strong changes in the past couple of years. In Mexico, we've implemented the new reporting standards, IFRS S1, S2 for companies, so that we move from something voluntary to regulatory. Actually, since last year, and the reports that have to be provided this year from 2025 have to be under the standards. So that's moving fast in Mexico as well. Although the gap of companies that are ready for it is just 15-16%. It's expected to be like that. And so we have the pressure, the companies have the pressure of how to close that gap in order to not being left behind. We also have a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, the sustainability taxonomy in Mexico, which also changed. It's a game changer. So we're moving from not even voluntary things to suddenly very strong regulatory actions that will shape perhaps faster the changes in Mexico. Even that in the region we may have some changes on how things are expected and regulated, but at least in Mexico we're perhaps more aligned towards different regions in the world. So companies are asking, like, for instance, how fast can we move towards these new changes, because we may be missing out market opportunities or expectations from partners, even in North America.
And does the compact in Mexico, was it supportive of the regulatory changes on the disclosure laws, or are you involved in are you involved in advocacy with governments as part of the mandate?
We don't do that much of advocacy in Mexico, but we were giving space or floor for people to speak even beforehand. And that's usually what we do, at least in Mexico. When the taxonomy was underway, we have a lot of conversations, public conversations through our events or webinars or others. Yeah. Is preparing dialogues between the private and public sectors. So we were not doing advocacy directly, but we were perhaps giving the microphone to those interested in these aspects.
Great. Yeah. And Amanda or Elizabeth, are you guys involved in?
Yeah, we've played a very similar role. We did an event last November as part of Canada's inaugural Climate Exchange Week with PRI, the Principles for Responsible Investment. And we simply titled, "What Do Investors Want?" And really, investors want a consistent way of measuring impact. And the CSSB, so what would one day be Canada's version of the ISSB standards, we had them as speakers. I also spoke on their event during that week. And, we have not done any official advocacy around it, but we definitely see the benefits of making Canada stronger so that as the investors and asset holders at our event said, that they can measure apples to apples. And it's also our experience that leading companies, my staff really like this alliteration, leaders like legislation. Then where you should be investing, your competitors needed to invest the same way, and that you can be measured the same. Canada's regulatory environment compared to some other Western countries is pretty weak. We are just now starting to get there's a committee that's been assigned to be working on the financial taxonomy. And we've even had some challenges around, I think, what was meant to be a regulation that was really going to be supportive, our greenwashing legislation, but actually created a bit of a chill, a bit of confusion. So we give lots of space to that. We've got a webinar series. We actually have the Deputy Commissioner of the Competitions Bureau on an upcoming webinar to really talk through some of those pieces. So I think where we can facilitate the conversation and provide some guidance, that's the role we've been playing so far.
Excellent. Great. And Amanda, what's cooking in the U.S.?
What's cooking in the U.S.? Yeah, I mean, I think, look, where the push on regulation is no longer coming from the federal level in the United States. It's really more at the state level from states like California, New York, New Jersey, Washington, others, which I think is an interesting dynamic. But, U.S. companies, many U.S. companies are multinational companies. Many are operating globally. And so the global regulatory dynamics are impacting them as well. And I think companies are watching them. Even U.S.-based companies are watching them with great interest because it's going to affect how companies report in all of their markets. But I want to come back to what you were asking about the SDGs, because I think it's interesting in this context. The SDGs, when they were launched in 2015, were huge and broad, and 17 goals. What is it? 169 targets. I haven't said that in a while, but and they weren't written for companies, and so companies really had to translate, what does this mean for us in terms of targets and impacts and all the rest of it. And I think what's happened with the increased scrutiny and the regulatory environment evolving globally is that when it comes time to defining the role of business in delivering on the next SDGs or whatever they evolve to after 2030, we're going to be in a much better place to know what are the things we can coalesce around as a business a business community that are how we're going to move the needle. And we're going to have better and more common ways of measuring some of those that we can add and bring into that conversation when it comes to drafting all of that with the UN and the governments, et cetera. So I think that's pretty interesting. And I'm excited about what that will look like in just a few years, because we need to start talking about that soon.
Yeah, I'm hearing as well more people talking about post 2030 and beginning to look around the corner. So I think it is interesting. And I think, as you're saying, there'll be a different set of foundational aspects to kind of jump from. But go ahead, Elizabeth. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think what we'll also be able to come to, and I think in part through the UN Global Compact, is a better appreciation of where business really fits in and can create a multiplier effect. Right now, we actually do have something called the Forward Faster Initiative that really looks at the things that businesses can do uniquely or at scale differently than any other sector. Things like making sure that there's gender equity in the workplace, right? Really digging in on climate emissions, taking a look at livable wages and things where if this gets done right by business, so many other SDGs or whatever the future goals are called move together. But I say this as often as I can, so a podcast is a great place to do this, that, should anyone one day in the UN ask me my opinion on what the next global goals would look like, and so far that hasn't happened. But I really hope that they're articulated in a way that's much like Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action, where it's very clear that, here's the problem, here are the goals, and this is for business, and this is for government, and this is for academia, and this is for civil society, and that we can really parse that out so everyone can see how those roles collaborate together and bring their separate strengths, but there's very even clear measures within that for those different sectors.
And how do you, are you already thinking back to the post-2030 world? I guess, are you trying to grow the network and you still want more companies involved? Is 700 enough, Mauricio? Are you happy with 700? How do you manage that idea of a big tent versus the sense, well, if there's that many companies, is there a leadership cadre? Like, how do you wrestle with that, Mauricio?
Of course, we want to grow in companies because we can have more impact through them, especially through large ones and their supply, their value chains. That's something I think we would all want to keep growing because of the impact we can generate through them. And but I see things moving also to more, especially in the future, like how we can bring financial value to those companies. It's just not just reputational; it's more real business, and that actually that could be more the conversation in North America than ever. Like prove that this is good for business, and it is, but it's a challenge, and it's also perhaps the it mirrors perhaps the maturity of for some companies that have been doing a lot of sustainability and they are advanced in it. Perhaps it's a new challenge to prove it, but for the new companies, it has to be like that. For new companies moving forward, like trying to make the business case more clear for everyone.
I think you've touched on, Chris, though, something really interesting about the Global Compact. I mean, it has been a broad-based tent. I think globally we have about 25,000 companies now. There's a little tracker on the global website that tracks the company.
Oh, good. Okay.
And that's unique and different from an organization that maintains, a 50 company membership, for example. I think there's a lot of value in it, and it is what makes the compact unique in that, when you're signing up, it's a principles-based initiative. You're signing up to a community of companies that believe in the same 10 principles that you believe in. And what's interesting about being so large is that those companies are all across the globe, and you can tap into them through the networks and have companies interact with others in their supply chain, partners. So it's a large community. And we can also leverage the UN system to convene companies. And I think that's the UN strength around a multitude of issues in a multitude of different geographies. So I think that is very powerful and remains powerful, and especially in a world that sometimes feels a little bit more narrowly focused on home, whatever home means for that company or that country. So a huge value add. I think on the other hand, though, we are always thinking about, at least at Network USA, but I know also at global level and in your respective networks, how do we continue to add value to the companies in our network? Because the larger you grow, the more companies you have and the harder it is to provide value to each and every single one. So what are the ways that you can do that? And I think leveraging, for us right now, we're thinking about new and innovative ways to do that, but leveraging the convening power of the UN to meet companies where they are right now in this moment. And right now in this moment, companies are struggling through this kind of transition period. I call it a recalibration period of doing more with less, of smaller teams, of solving the challenges associated with multiple regulations in multiple jurisdictions. How do we bring companies together to really talk about those things in smaller groups of companies where they can find connections, learn from each other, has been a big focus this year for us, at least.
I love it, the recalibration era or period or epic. I think it's fantastic to have the network too there. And I guess you're saying you can engage the UN Environment Program or UNDP or other, WHO, other parts of the UN system for those conversations.
As we need to, we can pull them in. I think we're trying to be, how can we make sure we're bringing companies together in smaller groups? They can get the value from learning from each other. And as, those conversations evolve, plug in the right players from across the system, whether that be companies in other networks in other countries, or it's part of the UN system on the ground in UNDP's country office, for example.
I agree with what Amanda's saying. What we're also finding too is a big appetite for companies that want to be part of creating something together that will kind of create that higher tide that raises all boats. So yes, we do a lot of convening, we do a lot of training. There's a lot of we have a number of resources available, not just to companies in the compact, but otherwise on, great standards around the use of AI in business and human rights, on, how to tackle a new approach to science-based targets, all those different things. And some of them are online and some of them are in person, all those different things. But where we've seen this appetite is for, let's create something together, that kind of leave things better than they were before. So an example in our network is ourselves and WSP saw that companies were really struggling with biodiversity, nature-related financial disclosures. They were like, do I need to hire a scientist for this? I didn't sign up for this. Like, where do we even start? We don't want to get it wrong. Like, there's a lot of tension right now on getting things wrong. And so we called out for volunteers from our network to be in a working group. We got twice as much interest as we thought we could manage in a working group. Divided them into working group and first readers, and the result in English is a 14-page roadmap for identifying where you are in your biodiversity maturity. What are those resources that are available to you? And it's now been translated into all the languages of the UN. It was up for an award. And all those companies, those Canadian companies that participated in that, are so proud that they helped create something together that's going to leave the world better than, just if they tackle things on their own. And I think that's part of the magic of the UN Global Compact is, for sure, we've got things where you can just do hub and spoke. You can come and get what you want and go, or you can be part of really meaningful conversations that can change the tide.
I think what's exciting for me too about the compact and the principles related to it, and because it's, as you said, Amanda, this is the UN, so there's such a focus, unlike other sustainability networks, that's very people-centric. I mean, of course, you said, Elizabeth, nature there and biodiversity and climate is there, but there is a huge amount of effort on human rights issues and labor and poverty alleviation inherent in with the UN's mission and the SDGs as they're expressed, et cetera. So that it does round out and keep that triple bottom line, I think, much more visible than often conversations get into climate, sometimes nature, but a lot of climate. Mauricio, let's talk a little bit about the flavors. I mean, you got tequila. What do we have? We've got rye up north, Elizabeth, and we've got bourbon in.
You didn't go for maple syrup.
Maple. Okay, there it is. So the non-alcoholic version. But what? How do you? And because the three of you are working together, and we'll want to talk about that in a sec. But how do you see what's uniquely Mexican about corporate sustainability or the work you're doing, Mauricio? What's similar? What's different? Do you think?
That's a very interesting question. I have to think about it for a few more seconds. But in Mexico, it's been different. I would say what we're living recently, because we're the Mexican largest corporations are uniquely together with the value chain in North America. That's unique from the perspective of Mexico. Mm-hmm. And actually that's part of the recent conversations we've had here on how this is affecting or this could affect Mexican companies, for instance, where something produced in Mexico is part of a supply chain in Detroit or in Toronto in a factory over there, and so it's kind of different. As I said before, Mexico has advanced quite a lot in disclosure of sustainability, and that's forcing a lot of changes here. While perhaps now it happens that Mexico is more advanced in regulatory aspects than other countries, and so that and Mexican companies have always typically been a laggard in regulation and maybe doing things faster for their own legitimacy, and they move more because of legitimacy than perhaps regulatory. It always happens more or less like that in Mexico. It's a trend that you can see. So it's a different combination, perhaps that what can be seen in the northern countries, but you can see a lot of interest of companies moving forward, not only because of these regulation changes. It's just it's kind of very fast, let's say, and unique what is happening right now, and the different speeds at what things are evolving, how things are evolving in the continent, North American continent.
The dynamic and the adoption, I guess, and it sounds like the context has moved, so it's really rapidly. There's a rapid appetite for more sustainability or catching. So you said laggards, but I mean, I guess there's just more pressure, more momentum, more rationale to do more in Mexico. Is that right?
Yes, and but companies are very interested. I can see that whenever we speak to companies are really interested in moving forward. And perhaps it's also because of the regulatory changes. But they are very interested in moving forward. We see, for instance, a difference between perhaps what can be happening in the States is different in Mexico. We see sustainability teams growing within companies, perhaps small, but still they're hiring, they're new departments that never existed before 2 or 3, even 5 years ago. Most medium-sized companies and larger ones as well, now they do have specific people in their teams for sustainability. So it seems like things are moving towards this positive direction, let's say.
And Amanda, you already referenced the difference between the federal regulatory context and the state level, and so it's a more complicated patchwork, and everything I think goes back and forth on pendulums as administration has changed. So you've got to be above that to a degree and think long term. But how would you describe the flavor of corporate sustainability in the U.S.?
Well, first I would probably say, look, North American companies, all companies are really tied together in value chains. So what's happening in one is naturally going to ripple through another. So I think across all three of our countries, at least, companies are dealing with a lot of the same pressures, whether that's, around regulation or supply chain resilience or human rights expectations going up or energy costs. There's a lot of convergence there. I think where it's a little bit unique is maybe the political rhetoric right now. That state-driven regulation piece, and just I think the way that the way the world sees the U.S. right now is probably through headlines. There's a lot of headlines about sustainability dying, sustainability being pulled back. I think what's actually interesting is that that's not entirely the full picture. I think look at the nuance underneath that. It's starting to shift a little bit in the headlines, but what's really happening is that recalibration piece, and it's maybe happening a little bit quieter at a little bit smaller scale, but it's definitely still happening, and it's companies focusing a lot more and being ready for the next resurgence, because we know sustainability is coming back, right? The underlying drivers of why businesses need to do that and do this are still the underlying drivers. It's not going away, whether that's climate impacts or even AI and technology innovation, market forces. We still need to do this stuff. So I think what's unique in the U.S. is because of the external environment, companies are figuring out the new ways to do this, and they're starting to kind of implement sustainability in new ways through the reduction in team sizes in some cases, through more integration with finance teams and legal teams, and embedding sustainability across the business. I mean, even as sustainability professionals, we've always wanted this. So in some cases, we're getting what we've always wanted. But I think the pace at which that's happening and the quietness in which that's happening is interesting in the United States.
Yeah, a lot of noise to signal that we need to be aware of. And I agree. I mean, here I'm at a little conference in DC, and the conversation is well beyond my pay grade in some cases. The specificity and the technical aspects around how do greenhouse gas protocols, where do we go from here? How do we devise them in ways that do attend to finance and what investors are looking for? And can we do it in a way that unlocks a whole bunch of capital? And it's really sophisticated, quite impressive, despite the context. But Elizabeth, what about in Canada? Anything unique that you're feeling in the country?
I think there was, not just in business, not just in sustainability, but about a year ago, with changes in executive orders, with threats to our actual sovereignty, there was a lot of paradigm shift for Canadians, whoever they were, about where's our place in the world and what's our relationship like with the U.S., which has been our closest partner, our closest trading partner. I mean, I live an hour from the border, and I think the majority of Canadians live within 3 hours of the border, cross over fairly regularly, and feel really close. And it felt like not old home anymore. And so the impact that had on businesses, were what was going to happen to their trading relations, what's the impact of tariffs going to be. And if U.S. companies, for which they are, Canadian companies are either needing them for value chain or part of their value chain, were changing the way they were going to do business through the impact of executive orders, what was that going to mean for them? And how much pressure was that going to be, even though we are a fully sovereign country? And I think now, a year later, that's really dissipated. There's still the economic pressure of some of the changes that are going on in the world, whether or not you can get things out of the Strait of Hormuz, or whether or not that, you're being impacted by tariffs in certain sectors and some of the volatility around that. But I think what we're really seeing is Canadian companies really continuing to hold to their principles, really recognizing that for investors, that they know that being a sustainable, responsible, inclusive company is a better performing company, and really moving forward in those ways. And I think, as you mentioned, I think sustainability, the words associated with this work are hard always to define, but we really put it under the bigger piece of being responsible, and includes those social impact things too. And I've been really impressed, particularly in the last year, of Canadian companies that are really continuing to advance the way that they, whatever they call it now, inclusion and belonging, or whatever it is, really trying to make space at the table for everyone, and to recognize the strengths that different folks bring. And I think that is part of a history of pride around our multiculturalism as well. To make that kind of space. So, but even in areas of climate and sustainability, while we hear companies would like a little clearer path, please, on which kind of a framework, disclosure framework, upcoming possible regulations, they're still driving forward on trying to make changes, setting goals, and being innovative.
I will add, sorry, let me say interrupt, but I will add, just on that last piece around setting goals, I do also think what's changed, and I'm not sure it's a uniquely U.S. thing, but I think it's globally as well, is, kind of the era of setting these big, ambitious goals and putting them out publicly, and we'll see how we get to them, I think is kind of over, and that's changed quite suddenly. The goal setting process is much more rigorous. There's much more data behind it. It's much more focused. And I think that's interesting because as the UN Global Compact, we've been part of that, providing a platform for companies to announce these amazing things and put their energy behind this. So understanding that dynamic and how it's changing is really key, I think, to how we provide value and work with companies going forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's the recalibration again is like helping guide that recalibration, and especially with newcomers in. I think, as you're saying, Mauricio, too, we need more people involved in whatever, and they're probably coming at it more recently than some companies that have been doing it for 10 or 20 years. But go ahead, Mauricio.
I also wanted to add that I said that, the Global Compact in Mexico has been here since 2005. I've been here in this position only for 6 years. But what I've seen, I've been pressuring to this. I've been challenging companies when I hear them. At least when I joined the Global Compact, I heard that many companies willing or basing their strategy on delivering value for the 17 SDGs. Like, we want to cover everything.
Right.
And my advice was completely against that. You have to keep towards your material aspects, and then you impact the SDGs, or you can monitor how you're impacting positively to the SDGs. And now I can see a movement of that a little bit slowly, of not trying to meet, because they can't, to not trying to meet the 17 SDGs. I hear more often this. So apparently in Mexico, we're moving forward to more materiality, more aspects that are more connected to the core business. So at least that's give me hope in Mexico that companies are trying to move towards there and not trying to cover everything, because it doesn't make sense for them to do it.
Yeah, part of the maturation of that. So what's I think you referenced collective action before, Elizabeth, but so is it unique? So the three of you are working together more often. It felt to me like a unique thing. Does this happen across the Compact network worldwide? Are you guys uniquely engaging and discussing? What's your vision of collaboration? Where might you take it? How are you thinking about this?
Across there are 63 country networks. And there's so much collaboration in different ways. Like the US and Canada were often looped in with the Western European countries, Mauricio and the country network, Mexico, looped in with the other Latin Americans. But sometimes we are all connected based on something we're working on specifically. And so that, collective action between ourselves and taking that to companies, we're trying to do that more and more. And I think we learn best and we multiply our skills by being able to work together. There is, believe it or not, there is, for example, a regulatory, we'll call it that, oversight commission across the continent, the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. I have the name right, don't I, Mauricio? We'll hope that I've got it. And
like a NAFTA-related thing?
Yeah, so a NAFTA, CUSMA related thing that, we've been engaging on, what is the role of business and something that we do collectively, and love that agency is really focused on the health, climate, environment-wise, and even economically and socially of the continent. Even just this morning, Amanda and I were talking about ways that we're going to get our senior leaders of some of our large and leading companies together to be having meaningful conversations. I think the vision for the Global Compact is then, what is the collective action of companies working together, and not yet well defined. I mentioned a survey from Boston Consulting Group, and collective action was an option, and companies voted it high, but didn't have a lot of definition behind it. And I'm looking forward to unpacking what that means. And I think it'll mean something different for different regions. It'll mean something different for different issues about what is effective collective action that we can pull companies together in, and bring them together with other sectors as well.
To your question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Please, Amanda.
No, you go.
Okay. No, to your point of how, if this is unique ways of working within the Global Compact, we are regionally and logically, perhaps each in our own regions, Latin America or North America and Europe or Asia, this and that. But economically, we also have a different, let's say, a different dynamic. No, for instance, the very South American countries that are really Southcom, they usually have their own needs and markets that makes them work together, while the European community as well. This is also happening here in North America, perhaps, that we are working together, and we can have a few more minutes to talk about a recent project we have all together, all the present people in this podcast. And we have this project. So you wanted to phrase that as it is. Amanda, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to add, I think a few things. I think absolutely, as networks across the globe, we're working together to figure out how we can drive the most to our companies. And so for one example, we've most recently, several networks in Europe and other geographies have pulled together a peer learning group that brings companies together across geographies who are able to learn from each other about what's happening in different countries, what lessons they can draw from that. And that's kind of not the first time, but one of the first times most recently that we've worked together as a group of networks, not just bringing companies together inside of our companies, but across boundaries. And we have so many opportunities to do that. So I think there's ways that we're working together to do that for companies. There's also just some practical ways. How does the Global Compact make use of AI? We have one country network, Australia, who I'm thinking about, and the executive director there, Kate, she's done so many innovative things with AI. So what lessons can we learn from that one network and bring to our operations, but also to our companies in terms of AI and sustainability? So I think that's also a way we work together. But I think there are so many other opportunities that we could do better as well and learn internally as the Global Compact in terms of working more as a system. So we're always at Network USA looking to what our peers are doing, Elizabeth, Mauricio, other networks, to see if there's things that are available that we can implement in the US that would be useful to companies. And we're always thinking about one of the things as somebody who used to represent a company in the Global Compact as well. One of the things that I was always experiencing, and one of the things I hear from our companies, is that it's almost an embarrassment of riches. You have so many networks and you're doing so many things. Right. How do I find the things that matter to me and are relevant to me? So I think we are also always looking to get better at that. And how do we communicate to companies what's most important material for what they need to work on right now. So thinking about that is a big priority for my network going forward.
Yeah, and all the 60 plus networks, the 23,000, 25,000 companies. I mean, there's such a laboratory happening and innovation. So finding those ways to shortcut and searching.
Finding it.
The robots will help with that. The robots will help.
The robots are going to fix it all.
But
I actually think the project that we're all moving towards working on together will really help kind of prioritize and organize that a little bit. The work that our three networks along with GlobeScan are doing to really understand what sustainability leadership looks like in uncertain times, I think will illuminate some good practices, some gaps, some hopes, and help focus, I think, a little bit our work and how we communicate and what we prioritize, but even what we create anew based on some of those findings, and certainly hope that those findings are helpful to companies as well, so that they get a better pulse in what has become a time where companies have been a little quieter, right? I think like 5 years ago, you could be much clearer on what company X, Y, and Z, or what a particular sector was up to, because they were really shouting it from the rooftop. There was no lack of tall poppies really wanting to show. And now, because of regulations, because of all kinds of different things, we see companies being a little bit quieter, I think, though still doing the good work. So hopefully our work together will shine a little light into that to show what's happening and where the possibilities are.
Yeah, and we'll do a survey of the network across North America, which is exciting, as you said, Elizabeth, to bring to light what businesses are doing, what they're thinking of, where the opportunities. And Mauricio, where will this be released? The research, this prized, fundamental, foundational research, where will it be shared and how?
This study will be released perhaps in the first few days of September. We're hoping to have it ready in the first days of September. That's where we're looking at. So I don't want to commit to a specific date, but I believe it's going to be on the week of the 7th of September, maybe.
Yeah, great, good. Well, thank you, all three of you. I think it's all of you have this amazing experience inside companies and now outside supporting and facilitating and driving this collective action. And I think the networks and all the work you do are real important accelerants to drive this forward at the scale that you have in the compact and the scale of the networks that you have, which is really exciting. So thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Mauricio. It was a great conversation. And for those who enjoyed this podcast, please do share it with friends and family, enemies, even if needed to. The more people hear the wonderful perspectives of these three people, the better. And so thank you all.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
Chris.
Muchas gracias.